Hey, May here. We're just starting a new series. It's about me teaching Mico how to play Kerbal Space Program. And some simple crafts you can build just to achieve some of the basic level gear in the game. We're going to start by playing Sandbox mode, and then move into Career mode once we've gone over the basics. I hope you found this series useful. Now we're going to cut to past me building the first ship. Come to this screen. We go to the vehicle assembly building in the middle of the page. Now we're going to build a rocket that is capable of going outside of Kerbin, and one that is also capable of landing on all the moons. So we're going to make one that's very fuel efficient and very easy to use. So what we're going to do to make it most easy to use, we're going to use the smallest capsule we've got, which is this one. Then what we're going to do is we're going to scroll up to the top using the scroll wheel and put it up here. Now we're going to think about the Kerbal's survival. So we have a little Kerbal in here, all these little guys down the bottom. One of them is in here, his name is Jebediah. Now we're going to make sure Jebediah is safe at all times, because we do not want to kill anyone if we can avoid it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come across and we're going to put this little parachute on it. I'm a little worried about its manufacturer, but we should be alright. So we're going to grab this little parachute, I'm going to put it on the top, which is good. Now he'll have a parachute in the capsule if there's a problem. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of power generation on it, so we can keep the coffee machine running and keep the gimbals inside the capsule working. To do that, we're going to go into the utility tab, and I want to come down to this little solar panel down here. These are really tiny basic solar panels. I call them kickstart solar panels because they will always provide power and they'll kickstart your craft back into life if they're on the power. Before we click this though, we need to go down to symmetry. We need to click it once, grab the solar panels, hold right click to rotate the camera around, and put it somewhere on these white lines. This symmetry mode will allow you to put one on each side. So that's good. We now have a capsule that will not run out of power and we'll be able to land safely. Now we're going to start to build the main section of the craft, the space maneuvering engines. To do that, first off, the very first thing we need to do is we need to add a little decoupler, just here. What a decoupler does is it decouples it from the rest of the spacecraft. So when the craft returns from orbit, we can return the capsule with the crew, because it doesn't matter what happens to the rest of the craft. We just need to keep the Kerbal safe. So once we've added that, we're going to add a fuel tank. We're going to add this one, because this is a little bit too small. These are very much too small. And this one is about right. It's about as big as the capsule. So we're going to put that one on the edge. Now we're going to pick an engine. I'm going to click back on propulsion. And I'm going to bring out a couple of engines for us to look at. Alright, there are a bunch of ghosted engines here. The big one on here is called the mainsail. It has a very, very high thrust, so it has a lot of power, but it's not very efficient on fuel. Next one is called a skipper. It's somewhere in between. This little one here, there's two of them. But basically this is a smaller craft thruster, which lets you maneuver around. It's in between these next two. This is the nuclear rocket, or the atomic rocket. It is the most efficient in space because it has a very low thrust, but it's very fuel efficient. So for our space maneuvering stage, we're going to click this one on. We're going to grab the nuclear thruster and we're going to put it down here. Now, the next thing is we're going to try and land on planets. Currently there's no way to land with this, unless you're very skillful. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into structural. I'm going to grab this modular girder segment, XL. Before we click on it, we're going to click symmetry mode twice. Bring it up to 4. We're going to grab the girder segment. I'm going to come just in front of the capsule at the bottom and put them on there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slowly rotate them. To do that, you hold shift and press W. When you're happy with its rotation, click it. Now we have made a little area where we can land. Now, as I'm sure you can see, the rocket still sticks out a little way, so we're going to put one extra thing on. We're going to go to Utility. I want to select these landing legs. And we're going to go put them on. To do that, we hover them over the bottom, then we press Shift and S to rotate them. Now, if it makes you happy at this point, you can right click them and go Start Retracted. That way then you can also see if it's covering the engine. As you can see, ours is just covering the engine. So now we can land on other planets. Next on our list is to get us out of Kerbin, because Kerbin's quite high up. So we have to go back to our we have to go back to structural and pick a decoupler. Now what we're going to do, as you can see, it just got a cowling on it. A cowling stops the engine from shaking around and braking. Now we're going to scroll down and we're going to pick a fuel tank for this stage. And we're going to pick these large orange ones. While you're learning, these are great fun to play with because they contain a lot of fuel and they're very simple to use. Now when I take this fuel tank, I'm going to plug it in the bottom. And we're going to do this 3 times because we want to add a lot of fuel. We can't add more than 3 though, because the little engine we're going to put on it will not be powerful enough to lift it. So click on propulsion again and grab the mainsail. This is very inefficient, but it provides a lot of power so it can lift one up very high. So we're going to click this on the end. Now, if we were to put this on the launch pad, it would fall and break because of the weight on the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the structural tab and we're going to grab this thing called a docking clamp or a launch stability enhancer. Docking clamp. I'm going to grab them and we're going to put them on the middle. Just like that. That way the craft won't shake around and it'll be held off the ground while we launch. Now I'm going to direct your eyes to our staging. We're going to make sure it's alright. So what happens? What does this represent? This represents these docking clamps coming undone. This engine turning on. Scroll up a little bit. This coming undone. The engine firing. This detaching. And then the parachute opening. So each time I press spacebar, one of these events will happen. Now we're going to pass this over to Mico so she can have a fly. Alright. Now what we want to do is we want to set up before we go to Minimus. And to do that we're going to press the M key to go to the map and set all the stuff up on the map screen. Now the first thing we need to do will be to rotate around so we can see the craft in relation to the planet. We're on this little island here. I say island, it's a really big continent. But we're on this little bit of sand. And we zoom back out by using the scroll. We need to open up the nav ball down the bottom and zoom out until we can see this the moon that's on the purple line. And we click on it, go set as target, and zoom back in. Now we have the map screen totally set up for when we're got more time sensitive things to be doing. Press the M key to go back. Now what we need to do will be we need to get the computer controls turned on. To that we press T. And now the AI on board the craft will do its best to point us at this point. If we shake or something explodes, it will do its best to keep us pointing at that mark. Now we're ready to go. We have to turn the engine on. To do that we use the shift key, goes up, control key makes it go down. X key makes it stop altogether. So it's a complete cut off. Now let's put our engine up to full power, to 100%. Now when we press spacebar, which will activate this staging, we will decouple these locking clamps. Not sure why that one's shaking around. And then we'll fire this engine at the bottom. So you can see them lighting up as I hover over them. So when you're ready to launch, press spacebar. Launch. So now we'll start to go up. I'm going to come up to the resources tab and hover over the liquid fuel so we can see where it's draining from. Now while we fly, you want to keep your surface velocity, which is the number down here, below 150, and at 10,000 meters off the ground, you want to turn over to this 90-degree mark by holding the D key. Okay. So we're draining from the top of the orange fuel tanks. When we've drained all the fuel, we'll decouple and we'll go the rest in the little engine up the top.
Do you need to fold up the little legs?
And the little landing legs there should be fine. They're not going to cause too much drag. And at this point, they're not coded into Kerbal Space Program to cause any weird aerodynamics problems. So okay, but if it makes you feel happy, you can click this gears button up here. Now fold up. But at the angle they're at, they're still going to catch a lot of wind. So you can see our surface velocity is rising, so we're going to slowly start to decrease it. It's going up because we're further away from the planet, so the gravitatory hold is lower and there's less aerodynamic. And the reason we're going to keep it below 150 is because we're pushing against more atmosphere, and the more atmosphere we push against, the more fuel we waste. So if we keep it below, then we're not pushing against too much too quickly. The atmospheric drag. Alright, so we're nearly at the marker, so if you turn over towards 90, you don't need to worry about keeping the meters per second of surface velocity down now, because we're about to try and change our orbit. Alright, when we're on the 90 mark, press shift to turn our engines up to full power. Alright, now we're on the 90 marker and we're firing at full power. Press the M key to go back to the map. The craft keeps firing while we're on the map screen. Now, we want to get this new blue line, our blue line, this is the blue line we'll travel at if our engine's suddenly turned off, up to 100,000 meters off the ground. It will slowly increase, and when it gets to 100,000 we're going to cut our engines with X. Alright, now the numbers will start to count down there because we're still in atmosphere, so we get a bit of atmospheric drag. It's not a big problem. Now, could you roll the craft over with the D key and try and get it between the artificial horizon and the artificial ground with the D key? You can undo the map if you want and go back to the craft. Doesn't particularly matter because you've got the nav ball on both screens. Now it will take a lot longer to rotate, because we don't have this engine gimbaling, which is where it moves the thrust off center so it can change and steer. So we've only got this little capsule turning us now. So it'll take a lot longer than what it was before. Just remember, as we're in space, you also need to slow down by holding the A key. That's where we came from. Getting a fair distance away now. So near enough here is good enough, but just as close as you can get it, because we want to use the last of this fuel. I can open up the fuel tanks individually by clicking on them, or I can hover over the liquid fuel or oxidizer or liquid fuel. It's probably the more useful number. Now what we're waiting for up here is to reach our apoapse marker, which was 100,000 meters off the ground. When we get there, we want to turn our engines onto full, and we do that by holding shift. Ready, Mico? Here we go. Alright, press spacebar now to jettison our stage, and press spacebar again to get our new engine out. Now if you press the M key, what I want you to do now is keep the time to apoapse, which is this little T that appears down here, at 5 seconds. So when it gets close, you hold the A key to make it approach slower by pointing yourself more towards the sky. So when it gets lower, point it up a bit more, and the time will start to tick down slower. So you want to try and keep it about 5 seconds, because the most efficient to press D key to scroll yourself back down towards this marker here. It's the most efficient burn is when you're on your apoapse or periapse, and your apoapse is the highest point in your orbit and the periapse is the lowest. It's marked by AP and the PE. So point more towards the sky, because with time to apoapse is down to 1. So press A to move towards the artificial horizon, and it will pull the apoapse back. And you want to keep it on about 5 seconds. So you go back towards the marker. If you feel like it's accelerating away from you, you go back down to this little marker down here. Now you're thrusting straight along this line. So the time starts to count down because you're traveling towards it. So while this is going on, your orbit is stretching out back here. Now, when this appears, you have to worry more about this than that. You just want to point yourself on that marker. And you want to watch this. You want to get this up to the 10,000 mark as well. 100,000 mark, sorry. And press X when it gets there. Beautiful. So now we have an orbit that's pretty close for the highest point and the lowest point. Now we're in orbit. That's most of the time sensitive stuff done for this mission. So you can press the M key to admire your work. And now we have this little craft and this little Kerbal in space.